Well, M23 rebels continue to gain ground in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The militant group has now entered Bukavu, the second largest mineral-rich city in the country. The latest advances renewed fears of an all-out regional conflict. Let's unpack the story this afternoon. We're joined by Professor Kristof Titeca, who is a professor of international development at Antwerp University. Prof, it is great to talk to you. Thanks very much for your time. And I want to ask you this, two of the largest cities in the DRC now under the control of M23 rebels. What does this mean for the conflict?
Yes, so indeed, since this morning or yesterday, Bukavu, which is the second biggest city in eastern Congo, is now being occupied by M23. Well, it means a number of things. First of all, for Kinshasa, for the Congolese government, and the president particularly, it further weakens his legitimacy. It puts a lot of pressure on the president at the moment. For the rebel group, it means they further expand their territory, and it seems that the Congolese government is largely losing control over the east of the country. Not only is M23 supported by Rwanda, there are also reports of Ugandan troops entering the country.
So I suppose the next question would be these different groups that have entered the country, some for peacekeeping, peace enforcement, however you want to phrase it. Are they interested, in your opinion, in a peace, in a sustained peace deal in Eastern DRC and in the region?
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. So the main actors in the current conflict are particularly M23, the rebel group, which is supported by Rwanda and by the Rwandan army. They are not interested in peace. What they are at the moment doing is de facto occupying the country, and they are expanding their territory. Then there's also another actor, Uganda, which in theory is conducting joint military operations with the Congolese government. But the head of the army has announced that he will invade another Congolese town. So they're also not really interested in making peace with the Congolese government, it seems. And then lastly, you have the international peacekeeping forces, the UN peacekeeping forces, but then also the peacekeeping forces of the South Africa, of the SADC, of the South African Development Community. They largely seem to be out of the game, so to speak. They no longer seem to be involved in the conflict at the time being.
Yeah, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, is what you're referring to. So did you say, Professor, did I understand correctly, did you say that there were actors from inside the country as well, from in the DRC military, that are actively working against any kind of sustained peace?
No. Thanks for clarifying, but no, that's not what I meant. The Congolese army, in theory, should be fighting this rebellion, and to some extent it is. Only Bukavu, before it was taken over by M23, the rebel group, most of the Congolese armed forces, they had fled the city. They had put up resistance before the rebel group took over the city, outside of the city, but they have fled Bukavu, and Bukavu is now in the hands of the M23 rebel group.
So what, in terms of international politics, in terms of peacekeeping efforts around the world in situations like this, in terms of humanitarian efforts for the people who have to move from place to place in fear of their lives and of their safety, what should be the next steps there for other countries, other nations?
Okay, thanks. Since the beginning of January, at least 700,000 people have fled because of the violence of the M23 rebel group. Over the last week, the M23 rebel group, they have basically forced tens of thousands internally displaced people from their camps, from their IDP camps. So there's a major humanitarian disaster unfolding. Key in all of this is the role of Rwanda. Over the last few years, there have been a number of reports clearly showing Rwandan support to the M23 rebel group, and Rwanda is becoming increasingly open about its support. When the same conflict happened in 2012, 2013, key to the resolution of this conflict was exactly pressure on Rwanda, but this is lacking at this moment. In 2012, 2013, all the major donor countries to Rwanda, they exerted major pressure. But for now, this is not happening at the moment.
So the fall of the second city representing quite a massive expansion in territory for M23. And it means, of course, that there must be a further expansion and even further expansion on the cards. What happens then?
Yes, that's the question. No one really knows what happens next. It seems indeed they will further expand, but it's unclear up to where. At some point they announced they will go up to Kinshasa, but Kinshasa is very far away from the east of the country. So it will depend on, will the Congolese government, will it hold? What will happen? There's a lot of rumors circulating on internal pressure, internal reshuffle, up to rumors about a coup which might potentially happen. So that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is that M23 is primarily interested in the eastern part of the country. It is establishing a parallel administration at the moment. It has taken over border posts, it has taken over administrations, and so on. So it is establishing what can be seen as a rebel administration, again, largely supported by Rwanda.
And what do we call that? A coup?
No, a coup would be internally in Kinshasa if from within the army or within the government people would take over power. And there's a lot of rumors about that, but that's not happening up to now. What's happening now, it's a de facto occupation, a de facto annexation, similar to what happened in Ukraine with Crimea, for example. It's a neighboring country entering another country and de facto occupying it through a proxy this time. And this proxy is M23 as a rebel group.
Right. And there are surely international laws that must prevent one country from doing this to another.
Exactly. And that's the major frustration for many Congolese. Why has the international community been that strong in taking action when this happened in Ukraine? Why isn't this happening now? Because indeed, the presence of Rwandan troops is against international law. In December, conservative estimates put this amount of troops up to, I forgot the exact number, I think it was around 7,000, but this has increased since the takeover of Goma.
Yeah. It's ironic, isn't it? Because the AU summit, the AU has just been holding its heads of state summit in Ethiopia this past week. You know, the AU is meant to be a regional body. Surely one of the things on its agenda would have been to try and fight this reputation as a toothless organization run by a boys' club. But all they could do was say they urge M23 to disarm and that the organization is very concerned about an open regional war. I mean, should the AU play a much stronger role insofar as this is concerned? And do they have the capacity to do that? Do they have the will and the ability?
Yes, that's a very good comment indeed. And I'm afraid I have to agree with what you say, that also the AU has largely proven to be teethless in the current conflict. There's been a whole range of peace processes, first mediated by Angola, also by Kenya, and so on. But so far, all of these have yielded limited results. Before Trump came to power, the US was putting quite some pressure on Kigali, but since Trump has taken over power, also that has reduced. The EU, the European Union, also has not been able to take any firm decisions. They're also internally divided on this issue, with some countries blocking sanctions against Rwanda. So indeed, what we see is a large degree of powerlessness by the international community and a lack of action to intervene.
Certainly. Professor Kristof Titeca, let me thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's a Professor of International Development at Antwerp University, joining us this afternoon as we continue to track the story of the second DRC city falling to M23 rebels. Of course, this means the rebel group is gaining ground. The Congolese government is losing control over the eastern part of that country.